My name is Brooklyn, and this is the story of how my parents' worst nightmare became their greatest teacher. I was 19 when I first saw Marcus in the engineering building at the University of Colorado, Denver. It was a crisp October morning in 2016, and I was rushing to my business administration class when I literally crashed into him. My coffee went flying, splashing all over his worn-out textbooks and oil-stained work shirt. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I gasped, frantically trying to wipe the coffee off his books with my scarf. Marcus just laughed. This warm, genuine laugh that made my heart skip a beat. "Don't worry about it," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent that I later learned came from his Mexican heritage. "These books have survived worse. I work at Jimmy's auto shop downtown, so a little coffee is nothing compared to motor oil." That's when I really looked at him. Dark hair, kind brown eyes, and hands that told stories of hard work. He was everything my parents had taught me to avoid working class, from a different background. Someone who had to work his way through college instead of having it handed to him like I did. We started talking, and I discovered that Marcus was studying mechanical engineering while working full-time to support not just himself, but also sending money back home to help his younger sister finish high school. He had dreams of creating sustainable transportation solutions, of making the world better through innovation. I was captivated. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other. The campus coffee shop, the library, study groups. Each conversation revealed more about this incredible person who saw the world so differently from anyone I'd ever known. While my sorority sisters talked about designer bags and spring break trips to Sebio, Marcus talked about renewable energy and his plans to start his own company someday. 3 months later, when I finally worked up the courage to bring him home for dinner, I knew my parents wouldn't approve. But I had no idea just how explosive their reaction would be. My father, Richard, is a successful investment banker who's used to getting his way. My mother, Patricia, comes from old Denver money and has very specific ideas about appropriate relationships. They took one look at Marcus, his secondhand clothes, his calloused hands, his humble demeanor, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. The dinner was a disaster. My father grilled Marcus about his prospects and made condescending comments about blue-collar work. My mother kept asking pointed questions about his family's situation and whether he understood the lifestyle I was accustomed to. Marcus handled it with more grace than they deserved, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. After you left, the real explosion began. "Brooklyn, what are you thinking?" My father demanded, his face red with anger. "This boy is going nowhere. He's a mechanic, for God's sake. He's studying engineering, Dad. He's brilliant and hardworking, and he's using you." My mother interrupted coldly. "Can't you see that? He's after our money, our connections. This is exactly the kind of mistake that ruins lives." The argument lasted until 2 a.m. They called Marcus every name in the book: gold digger, opportunist, a distraction from my real future. They couldn't see past his background to the incredible person he was. The next morning, my father delivered his ultimatum over breakfast. "You will stop seeing this boy immediately, or we will cut off your allowance and pull you out of school. Your choice, Brooklyn." I stared at my parents across our marble kitchen island, realizing for the first time that they didn't really know me at all. They saw me as an extension of their social status, not as a person capable of making my own decisions about love. That's when I made the choice that would change everything. "I understand," I said quietly, watching relief flood their faces. But inside, I was already planning my rebellion. What my parents didn't know was that their ultimatum had just lit a fire inside me that would burn brighter than they could ever. Imagine I looked them straight in the eye that morning and lied. "You're right," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'll end things with Marcus today." My mother actually smiled, this satisfied, victorious smile that made my stomach turn. "You're making the right choice, sweetheart. You'll thank us for this someday." But as I walked out of that house, I wasn't thinking about gratitude. I was thinking about freedom. The first thing I did was drive straight to Marcus. I found him at Jimmy's auto shop, his hands deep in the engine of a 1995 Honda Civic, grease smeared across his forehead. When he saw my face, he immediately knew something was wrong. They want me to stop seeing you, I told him, my voice barely above a whisper. I watched his shoulders slump, saw the resignation creep into his eyes. Maybe they're right, Brooklyn. Maybe I'm not good enough for... Don't you dare finish that sentence, I interrupted, grabbing his oil-stained hands in mine. They're not right about anything. But Marcus, if we're going to do this, we have to be smart about it. That afternoon, we sat in his beat-up Toyota Corolla in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven, planning what felt like the most important strategy of our lives. We decided to go underground, to continue our relationship in complete secrecy while I figured out how to become financially independent. The next few weeks were like living a double life. At home, I played the part of the obedient daughter. I talked about focusing on my studies, mentioned boys from appropriate families that my sorority sisters were dating, and even went on a few fake dates that my mother arranged coffee. Meetings with the sons of her country club friends that lasted exactly 1 hour and left me feeling empty inside. But every moment I could steal away, I was with Marcus. We met at coffee shops across town, studied together in the back corners of libraries my parents would never visit, and spent hours talking about our dreams in his tiny apartment near campus. His place was a studio above a Mexican restaurant, barely 400 square feet, but it felt more like home than my parents' mansion ever had. It was there, surrounded by his engineering textbooks and the smell of carnitas from downstairs, that I started planning my escape from financial dependence. I need to get a scholarship, I told him one evening as we shared takeout Chinese food on his second-hand couch. And I need a job. Marcus looked up from his low mane, concern creasing his brow. Brooklyn, are you sure about this? Your parents... They could make things really difficult for you. They already are making things difficult, I replied. They're trying to control who I love. That's not protection, Marcus. That's manipulation. The scholarship hunt was brutal. I spent every free moment researching opportunities, writing essays, and preparing for interviews. My GPA was solid, 3.7, but I was competing against students who had been planning for financial independence their entire lives, not someone who had lived in privilege and was just now learning to fight for herself. Meanwhile, I started looking for work. The irony wasn't lost on me that I, who had never held a job in my life, was now desperately trying to find one while pretending to my parents that I was focusing solely on academics. My first interview was at a local marketing firm that needed a part-time assistant. I walked in wearing one of my designer blazers, my confidence masking the fact that I had no real work experience beyond organizing charity galas for my mother's social circle. So, Brooklyn, the hiring manager, a woman named Sarah in her 30s, looked over a resume with raised eyebrows. I see you've done some volunteer work, but no paid employment. Why are you looking for a job now? I did practice this answer. I want to gain real-world experience in business before I graduate. I believe that understanding how companies operate from the ground up will make me a better leader someday. It wasn't entirely a lie, but the real reason that I was secretly rebelling against my parents to be with the love of my life probably wouldn't have gotten me the job. Sarah hired me on the spot, offering me 20 hours a week at $12 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The hardest part was explaining my new schedule to my parents. I told them I had joined an intensive study group that met several evenings a week and some weekends. My mother was thrilled that I was taking my education seriously, never suspecting that I was actually learning to answer phones, file documents, and write marketing copy for small businesses. Those first few months of working were humbling as I never expected. I made mistakes, lots of them. I accidentally deleted important files, mixed up client appointments, and once sent a marketing email to the wrong mailing list. But Sarah was patient with me, and slowly, I started to understand what it meant to earn something through your own effort. The breakthrough came in February 2017. When I received an email that changed everything. I had been awarded the Colorado Business Leaders Scholarship, a full ride for my remaining 2 years, plus a small living stipend. The scholarship was merit-based and need-blind, which meant my parents' wealth hadn't disqualified me, but it also meant I had earned it entirely on my own. I was sitting in the campus library when I opened that email, and I actually started crying. Right there between the stacks of business textbooks, Marcus found me 20 minutes later, still staring at my laptop screen in disbelief. "I got it," I whispered. "I actually got it." He pulled me into his arms right there in the library, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. I was no longer dependent on my parents' money for my education. That night, I called my parents to share the good news. About my scholarship, my father's reaction was telling. "That's unexpected," he said, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. "Why did you apply for scholarships? You know we can afford your tuition." "I wanted to challenge myself," I replied smoothly. "And now you can save that money for other things." What I didn't tell them was that I was already planning my next move. With the scholarship covering tuition and my job providing some income, I was slowly building toward complete independence. I'd opened my own bank account at a different bank, one where my parents had no connections, and I was saving every penny I could. Marcus and I celebrated that night at our favorite hole-in-the-wall Mexican restaurant, the one where the owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, had started treating us like family. She always gave us extra guacamole and asked about our studies in her broken English mixed with rapid Spanish. "Mia," she said to me that night, setting down a plate of her famous enchiladas, "you look different, happy, like a weight has been lifted." She was right. For the first time since my parents' ultimatum, I felt like I was building something real. Not just my relationship with Marcus, but my own identity as an independent person. But I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Living a double life was exhausting, and I could see the toll it was taking on Marcus too. He hated that we had to sneak around, hated that I was lying to my family, even if it was for us. "Sometimes I wonder if your parents are right," he said one night as we walked through downtown Denver, careful to stay in neighborhoods where we wouldn't run into anyone from my parents' social circle. "Maybe you would be better off with someone who doesn't complicate your life like this." I stopped walking and turned to face him under a streetlight, my breath visible in the cold March air. "Marcus, look at me. Really look at me. Do I seem like someone who's settling? Do I seem like someone who's making a mistake?" He studied my face, and I could see him taking in the changes of the past few months, the confidence I gained from working, the independence I'd fought for, the certainty in my eyes when I looked at him. "No," he said finally. "You seem like someone who knows exactly what she wants." "That's because I do," I replied, taking his hands in mine. "I want you. I want the life we're building together, and I want to stop hiding it." As we stood there on that Denver street corner, I made another decision that would change everything. It was time to stop living in secret. It was time to show my parents and the world exactly who Brooklyn really was. But first, Marcus and I had some serious planning to do. By the spring of 2018, Marcus and I had been living our secret life for over a year, and I was getting tired of the lies. But more than that, I was getting excited about something bigger, something that would prove to everyone, especially my parents, that Marcus and I weren't just a rebellious fling, but a partnership that could change the world. It started with a late-night conversation in Marcus's apartment. We were both exhausted from our final exams, him from mechanical engineering, me from business administration, when he showed me something that would alter the course of our lives forever. "I've been working on this project for my senior capstone," he said, pulling out a thick folder filled with blueprints, calculations, and technical drawings. "It's a hybrid engine design that could reduce carbon emissions by 40% while actually increasing fuel efficiency." I stared at the papers, trying to make sense of the complex engineering diagrams. "Marcus, this is incredible. Have you shown this to your professors?" "Yeah, and they think it has real commercial potential, but Brooklyn..." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd learned meant he was stressed. "I have no idea how to turn this into an actual business. I know engines, I know engineering, but I don't know anything about patents, investors, marketing, business, plans, That's when it hit me like a lightning bolt. But I do. We spent the entire night talking, planning, dreaming. By sunrise, we had the skeleton of what would become Green Drive Technologies. Marcus would handle the technical development and engineering, while I would manage the business side, Everything from securing patents to finding investors to developing our marketing strategy. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity that I had to carefully hide from my parents. While they thought I was spending my summer before senior year interning at my father's investment firm, which I was, 3 days a week, I was actually spending every other moment building a company with Marcus Dot we started in his apartment, transforming his tiny living space into our headquarters. His kitchen table became our conference room, his bedroom closet became our filing system, and his bathroom mirror became our whiteboard for brainstorming sessions. It was cramped, chaotic, and absolutely perfect. The first major hurdle was the patent application. I spent weeks researching intellectual property law, learning about provisional patents, and finding an affordable attorney who specialized in automotive technology. Using money from my part-time job and some savings I'd managed to accumulate, we filed our first provisional patent in July 2018. Brooklyn, Marcus said the day we submitted the application, "I can't believe we actually did this. 6 months ago, this was just a crazy idea for a school project. This is just the beginning," I told him, and I meant it. I could see our future so clearly, not just as a couple, but as business partners who were going to revolutionize the automotive industry. The second challenge was funding. We needed money for prototyping, testing, and eventually manufacturing. I knew my parents had connections to investors, but obviously, I couldn't use those resources without revealing everything. Instead, I started networking on my own. I attended every business meet, startup event, and entrepreneurship conference in the Denver area. I learned to pitch our idea in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and 5 minutes. I practiced until I could explain Marcus's technical innovation in terms that non-engineers could understand and get excited about. Our first real break came at a Colorado Clean Energy Summit in August. I had convinced Marcus to come with me, even though he was terrified of public speaking. We had a small booth in the startup showcase section, squeezed between a solar panel company and a wind energy startup. That's where we met Jennifer Walsh, a venture capitalist who specialized in sustainable technology investments. She was in her 40s, sharp as a razor, and had a reputation for finding diamonds in the rough. "Tell me about your technology," she said, stopping at our booth with the kind of focused attention that made my heart race. Marcus froze for a moment, so I jumped in. "We've developed a hybrid engine design that doesn't just reduce emissions. It actually improves performance while cutting fuel costs by 30%. The technology is patent pending, and we have working prototypes that demonstrate real-world applications." Jennifer's eyebrows went up. "Prototypes? You're students, right? How did you fund prototyping?" "We built them ourselves," Marcus said, finally finding his voice. "I work in an auto shop, so I have access to tools and equipment after hours. Brooklyn handles the business side while I focus on the engineering." For the next 20 minutes, Jennifer grilled us about our technology, our business model, our competition, and our long-term vision. She asked tough questions that I prepared for and some that I hadn't. But with every answer, I could see her getting more interested. "I'm impressed," she said finally. "You've done more with no funding than most startups do with their first round of investment. I'd like to schedule a formal presentation for next month." Walking out of that conference, Marcus and I were practically floating. We had our first real investor meeting scheduled, and suddenly, our crazy dream felt like it might actually become reality. But the real test came when we had to prepare for that presentation. Jennifer wanted a comprehensive business plan, financial projections, market analysis, and a live demonstration of our prototype. We had 3 weeks to put together the most important presentation of our lives. I took a leave of absence from my internship at my father's firm, telling him I needed to focus on a major senior project. It wasn't entirely a lie. This was definitely a major project, just not the kind he was expecting. Those 3 weeks were the most intense of my life. We worked 18-hour days, surviving on coffee, takeout, and pure determination. Marcus refined the prototype while I built financial models, researched market opportunities, and created a presentation that would convince Jennifer to invest in us the night before a presentation. We did a final run-through in Marcus's apartment. I stood in front of his bathroom mirror, practicing my pitch for the 100th time while he fine-tuned the engine demonstration. "Brooklyn," he said suddenly, looking up from his work. "What if this doesn't work? What if she says no?" I turned to face him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. This wasn't just about business for either of us. This was about proving that we could build something meaningful together. that our relationship was about more than just rebellion against my parents. Then we find another investor, I said firmly. And if that doesn't work, we find another one after that. Marcus, what we've built here isn't just a business plan. It's proof that we can create something amazing together. No matter what happens, tomorrow that doesn't change. The next morning, we drove to Jennifer's office in downtown Denver. I was wearing my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit that I bought with my own money from my part-time job, while Marcus wore the one good suit he owned. The same one he'd worn to that disastrous dinner with my parents over a year ago. Jennifer's office was on the 30th floor of a glass tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the Rocky Mountains. Her conference room was intimidating, all polished wood and leather chairs, but I reminded myself that we belonged here. Before we begin, Jennifer said, settling into her chair with a cup of coffee, I want you to know that I've done some preliminary research on your technology. I've had my technical team review your patent application, and they're very impressed. So today is really about you two, whether you have what it takes to turn this innovation into a successful company. For the next hour, we presented everything we'd worked on. Marcus demonstrated the prototype, explaining the technical specifications, with a confidence I never seen from him before. I walked through our business model, market analysis, and financial projections, fielding questions about everything from manufacturing costs to regulatory compliance. When we finished, Jennifer was quiet for a long moment, studying the papers. In front of her, I'm going to be direct with you, she said finally. This is one of the most promising technologies I've seen in 5 years. Your business plan is solid, your market research is thorough, and your prototype actually works. But I have concerns about your experience. You're both still students, you have no management experience, and you're asking me to invest in a company that exists primarily on paper. My heart sank, but Jennifer wasn't finished. However, she continued, I've learned that sometimes the best investments are in people, not just products. And you two have something that can't be taught, passion, determination, and a partnership that clearly works. So here's what I'm prepared to offer. She slid a term sheet across the table. $250,000 in seed funding for a 15% equity stake with the option for additional funding based on performance milestones. I stared at the numbers, hardly believing what I was seeing. $250,000. Enough to quit our part-time jobs, rent proper office space, hire additional engineers, and turn Grain Drive Technologies from a dream into a real company. There's one condition, Jennifer added. I want you both to graduate first. Finish your degrees. Then we'll finalize this deal. I'm investing in your long-term success, not just your immediate potential. Marcus and I looked at each other across that conference table, and I saw my own excitement reflected in his eyes. We had done it. We had actually done it. Ms. Walsh, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, you have a deal. As we walked out of that building and into the bright Colorado sunshine, Marcus grabbed my hand and spun me around right there on the sidewalk. We're going to be business owners, he said, laughing with pure joy. Brooklyn, we're actually going to be business owners. But even as we celebrated, I knew that our success was about to create a whole new set of challenges. Because eventually my parents were going to find out about Green Drive Technologies. And when they did, they were going to discover that their obedient daughter had been building an empire with the boy they'd forbidden her to see. The secret was about to come out, and I was ready for the explosion,